Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 12. Oh, Jesus. Welcome to episode 12 of Wynn's Kitchens podcast, where I have candid conversations with guests that share their knowledge and experience that supports the food CPG industry. Today, I have my guest, Juliet Blake. She is the founder and CEO of Ginsa, a brand new sparkling ginseng tonic company. Hi, Juliet. How are you?
Hi, Wynn. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. So I saw on LinkedIn about your new venture because we've actually touched base in the past when I was really just, super green and getting Wynn's Kitchen launched. And you've helped me so much with information. And so I wanted to find out, see what's going on.
Yeah, well, just on that note, you've been killing it. So I definitely been following you since we first touched base. I think it was in 2020, like when COVID was
It
just hitting. Yeah.
it was
Um,
a tough time for sure.
well, since then, so yeah, I launched Ginsa. Really, it's brand new. I just announced it on LinkedIn last week. I was working full time up until the end of June, so really only been doing it full time for about 3.5 months. But yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. It was very unexpected. Let's say I never thought I would do this, but here we are.
Yeah, so share with our listeners your background because I know you because we have a mutual friend. You were with Mama Chia and then another beverage company afterwards. So maybe share your experience with CPG with us.
So I've only worked really in the CPG space, majority in kind of startup food and beverage and mainly in beverage.
Mhm.
But during college, I did a lot of promotional kind of marketing work. And I bring this up, it's a long time ago, but I bring it up because it really kind of was the catalyst to what I started doing. So
Mhm.
I fell in love with the whole world of field marketing, event marketing. I did a lot of promo gigs when I was in college, and I started doing a lot of promotional work for beverage companies back then.
Mhm.
And I fell in love with both the promotional aspect and the beverage aspect.
Right.
And so after college, I worked at a couple of agencies doing projects for mainly alcohol companies. So
Mhm.
they would launch new brands here, or they'd be kind of rebranding. So like Mickey's Malt Liquor rebranded, which was really funny. So I worked on their the 40s campaign. And my first real kind of big girl job was at Diageo.
Okay.
Yeah, so huge company,
Mhm.
so different from what I kind of ended up doing, but I loved it. I learned so much from it. I was actually a salesperson back then, which is really surprising because I just don't like sales.
Oh, we're the opposite.
Yeah, well, I've always been a marketer. And so my thinking was to be a better marketer, I needed to understand like what my sales counterparts did. So I kind of forced myself to learn sales. So I was a sales rep for the Guinness portfolio for about 2 years. Again, learned a ton. Diageo is amazing for training. And so I was classically trained in that. But while I was there, I had a recruiter reach out to me. They were looking to hire a sales rep in Orange County for a very little known brand called Zico coconut water.
Right.
This was back in 2008. And I grew up in Hong Kong. I'm Korean, but I grew up in Hong Kong and I always grew up drinking coconuts. So
Mhm.
I
Same
love
here.
coconut water.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Me
so
too.
good.
Mhm.
And I just remember thinking like, wow, somebody figured out how to package just pure coconut water and I don't need a machete. Like this is amazing.
Right. Right.
So it was only sold in a couple of stores around me. And so I went to go pick one up and it tasted amazing. And I jumped ship from Diageo to Zico when it was still, the headquarters was still in Mark, the founder's garage in Oradell, New Jersey. So early
Wow.
on it was. I was the second California employee ever at Zico. So you can understand like how early stage the business
Wow.
was. Obviously my parents thought I was crazy, right? Like jumping ship from this like super stable big corporation to this, little brand that, the office is in someone's garage. But
Mhm.
I fell in love with it. I loved not knowing what I was going to be doing every day. I
Right.
loved building. And I think I didn't realize at the time then. But I worked basically 7 days a week, even, as kind of as like a younger worker. But for me, it was so fun. And I think because it felt like the job was part of my life, I didn't see like a separation really. And to me, it felt like a good thing to not be separated.
I agree with that. And just to touch base on that, I tell people all the time, like my business is my lifestyle.
Yeah,
It,
absolutely.
I have to incorporate into my life with my children, with my family. There is no separation. There's no if I intentionally take a day off, it's because I need a day off for me.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
there's no separation of like Sundays or days off.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not always the case, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's, it's funny when I think a lot of people say you need to separate, kind of professional and personal. And if I kind of go back to the Diageo days, the reason why I knew it wasn't authentic to me was because the dress code at Diageo was business casual. I
Right.
actually had to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe because I didn't have anything business casual because I always just wear casual things.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I was trying to force something into my life that wasn't authentic to who I am. And so when Zico came along, it was just, a match made in heaven. I was like, this is amazing. I love the product. Like, I love this kind of startup. I love not having rigid hours. And it was so much fun. And so from Zico launching that brand, I had a really kind of short stint at Kona Red, which started off as a coffee fruit beverage. They were launching in Hawaii. I wanted to bring it out here. And so I helped with that launch, bringing it over here to California. And during that, then I was kind of reached out to by another little known company called Body Armor. Back then, it was not the sports drink that we all know to this day. It was still kind of getting up and running. Was able to join Body Armor pretty early on as the first California marketing employee.
Wow.
Learned a ton there, obviously. I was actually interviewing with Starbucks at the same time, and I said to myself, I would just be really dumb to not work with somebody like Mike Rapoli, who was coming on the brand. So, Mike Rapoli obviously worked with Glasso, kind of sold that over to Coke, and I wanted to learn from somebody like that. So I joined the company, was so much fun, obviously learned a ton. Was there for a couple of years. And then I went to Mama Chia, which is where, obviously we know our mutual friend from, and was there for about 5.5 years, kind of headed marketing with Lance over there. And we basically grew it from just kind of being like a very, here US kind of based in, a couple of markets. And when I was there, I kind of helped with launching over 10 different countries. So we made it international. So learned a ton.
Realize that it was international. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
At its peak, we had a lot of distribution outside of the US. And I learned so much just like launching other countries, because obviously, the laws are all different. All the FDA regulations are completely different. So learned a ton there. And then after about 5.5 years, I kind of missed that, like, the early stage, just like the hustle and bustle. Even though Mama Chia was still, considered a startup, had been around now for a while. And so after that, I went over to Lemon Perfect, helped launch that brand into 3 kind of major markets. And then finally, I was like, okay, I've done this enough.
Yes. No kidding.
I've done it enough.
Yes.
I've learned kind of what to do, what not to do. So what I did do is actually took a break from working on the brand side and started my own marketing consulting agency,
Yeah.
specifically to help with brands launching. And so, one of the things I learned working in this industry is that there are a ton of agencies, I think, that pitch you ideas for when you're maybe a little bit farther along, right?
I
So
agree with that. I
yeah,
totally agree with that. And not a lot of people talk about the capital it takes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Been, that's been an eye opener and lesson for me. And
Yeah.
that's the first thing I share with people now,
Yes.
you know.
Yes, as you should.
Yeah, and I'm not, I love having the podcast, like we can help other people on a large scale, but because I can't do Zoom calls with everyone that reaches out, but I'm just like, this is not a fun side project unless you want it to be. Right?
Absolutely. Exactly.
less you want it to be, but it's
Absolutely.
extremely capital intensive. And sometimes you don't really know. Like when in the beginning, I'm like, well, how? Why is it capital intensive? And then, I learned very quickly that it's everything.
It
It's all
is.
part of it.
I think something that a lot of people, so I think the reason why a lot of people do get into food and beverage is because the barrier to entry is so low, right? If you think about it, like we don't have to do anything, right? Like we can technically we can outsource everything, right? Like so you have a formulation team, you have like the co-packer. I mean, you can literally outsource everything, but with the outsourcing comes a lot of capital.
Yes.
And I think for me, I just saw so many of these founders, not the ones that I worked with, but kind of in the industry struggling so much. And so what I realized was, for me being a marketer, kind of having a marketing background, one thing that a lot of people don't teach you is at the beginning stages of your brand, the marketing is the boring stuff, right? It's like figuring out your positioning, figuring out kind of what your packaging looks like. And it's just like the things that aren't so like sexy, to like the regular consumer. But I didn't see a lot of people kind of helping with that, like the pricing architecture, right? Like the channel strategy, like any of that stuff. So I set up the branding yard during COVID. And funnily enough, unfortunately for a lot of people, they obviously lost their jobs. But because of that, I was able to thrive because a lot of these companies needed help, but they didn't want to hire on people full time. So I did that for a few years. And end of 2020, Coke discontinued about 200 plus brands, and Zico was one of them.
Oh,
And so, yeah, so the founder, Mark, bought the brand back, and he and I were talking, and he's like, I'm working on something, and I was like, okay, I know exactly what you're working on. So I joined the Zico Rising team again to help relaunch the brand. So did that for about 2.5 years, back into about 10,000 doors. And then end of June, I was like, okay, seriously, no more. Like I'm done. And this idea behind Ginsa was really sparked really last year when I went back to South Korea with my family. So I took them back for a family vacation. And I've always grown up drinking ginseng. Like I love it, right? It's an acquired taste. Like,
I did too, because my background's Vietnamese,
yeah.
but I agree. I'm not sure if I had like sexy ginseng, so I can't wait to try
Totally.
that. Mine was like from like a Asian herbal place.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it came in this tiny little vial with this, like
Yes.
marinated thing in there.
Yeah.
And my mom would like make me drink it. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's good for your skin. Or so I literally would be like plugging my nose and just chugging this little like vial.
Yep. We probably had the same vials growing up. It's like a box full of like maybe 10 or 20 of
Tiny
them.
little vials, and there's like these scary
Little
like ribs
yes.
marinating inside.
Yes, I that's exactly what I grew up drinking. And then kind of as I got older, we just started having the extra because you get so used to the flavor. And so for me now, I love the taste of it. But I realized when we went back to South Korea, just how just common it was to see a ginseng store. And, South Korea now is just kind of known for like the K beauty, right? The K food, like everything just like healthy. And the more I talk to people about ginseng, I realize that one, people just didn't like the taste of it. They're like, there's no way I'm going to do it. It's disgusting. Oh my gosh. And two, it's just so expensive, right? So I kind of said, okay, like, how do I get more people to love ginseng the way I do? So we came up with Ginsa, which is a sparkling ginseng tonic, a lot more accessible, obviously a lot more affordable than having ginseng extract. And I think that was kind of the number one reason for Ginsa. And there's really kind of a social mission behind the brand as well, which I think, you and I obviously have been through a lot in this industry, like being Asian female, trying to run a business. It's really hard. And it was tough for me working on brands as well. I kind of, it's funny, I liken ginseng to me in the story where I say, when I looked at all these other beverages that had ginseng, it was just one ingredient in a myriad of like all these other ingredients. Right. So, the power of ginseng was really kind of covered up by all these other ingredients that didn't need to be there. So I wanted to make ginseng kind of front and center and make it the main character. So yeah, it's a little bit of a synergy, I think, between kind of like my life story.
Yeah, no, I love that. And because I know ginseng's been a little bit more popular in supplements, and that's where kind of I've seen it, but it's usually, like you said, packed into like other,
Yeah,
it's like a general, like, oh, it's like a general supplement, and then it has
exactly.
ginseng in it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I agree. I've never heard of it front and center. So can you share with us some of the health benefits of ginseng? Like
Yeah.
the secret to youth?
I mean, it's really considered just, they kind of say it really is a superfood. It's been around for centuries and there's a ton of different benefits, but the one that I focus on the most is really cognitive health.
Okay.
And so in South Korea, there's been a ton of studies that have been going on now where they have been giving ginseng extract, and specifically Korean red ginseng, to patients with Alzheimer's. And so, yeah, they've done like a little study where, they would split, the group up. So you have the control group and then the group that's taking ginseng. And the group that was taking ginseng, their memories improved dramatically. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so when then they stopped taking it, they actually fell back down to meet the control group. And so there's a lot of studies that have been going on. And for me, that was the number one thing I always felt when I took ginseng, especially kind of more towards the last few years. As soon as I take it, I just feel so awakened. And it's, I don't know if anyone's seen Limitless, the movie, but I feel like, in Limitless, I just felt like, oh my gosh, like I can kind of do whatever I need to do today. It's not caffeinated, so you don't feel like this kind of physical. Yeah, exactly. There's no crash, there's no jitters, but you're just so focused. And the way that my husband describes it is that he says it feels like the cobwebs in your head have just been blown away. And so
Okay, I need that.
so for
I'm
me,
like mom brain sometimes.
yes,
Like, oh my
that's
God.
exactly what it is. Yeah, it's like fighting the brain fatigue. And, I think especially nowadays, like it's just everyone's all over the place, right? You have the social media, you're always on your phone, you have emails, and we have like 1,000 tabs open. I'm looking at my computer screen right now, and it's just like ongoing. And I know that I'm never going to be able to change people's lifestyles and say, hey, slow down. Like hustlers are going to hustle. So like no matter how much you tell them to stop, they're not going to stop. So at least for me, my idea was, okay, well, let me help you hustle a little bit harder, right? Because you're not going to stop that. Yeah.
And building on that, because I can totally relate. I feel like I want to do so much at one time. And so I'm just like doing all these things and multitasking, which people say, I mean, there's studies that said there's no such thing as like a
Yeah.
true productive multitasker. And like I've cut back to only 1 cup of coffee a day. I mean, I crave it. I want another cup, but it does. It makes me anxious, like a little jittery, but I think I've been drinking coffee so much,
Yeah.
so long in my life that the jittery's not there. But as I've gotten older, it's the anxiousness.
Yeah.
I get really anxious and then I can't focus at all. I might have energy, but it's negative energy.
Yeah.
And then I feel overwhelmed and I'm like, I don't know where to start on my list to do. So, I'm really inspired to go back to, herbal medicine
Yeah, absolutely.
and rethink about ginseng. I'm excited to try Ginsa. And so where in the process are you? I know it's been a few months. And truth be told, I don't know a lot about the beverage side of CPG. Like, have you found a co-packer? I love your branding. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
You in the process.
Yeah. So in the last 3.5 months, we have finalized the formulation. I'm doing my trial run next month. So everything's kind of lined up. So we have a co-packer.
Awesome.
Kind of in that stage right now of procuring all the ingredients. Obviously my ginseng comes from South Korea. So that's kind of going to take a little bit longer. So yeah, I mean, everything is moving pretty quickly. It's funny because I was actually having this conversation with a colleague yesterday, but I've tried not to say anything about this kind of, this brand launch, because for people who are outside this industry, like I don't think they understand just how much goes into it, right?
Right. Right.
So every couple of weeks, like we'll have friends being like, well, what's going on now? And I'm like, still the same, like, and it's because we move in, like, it's a fast moving industry, but because of retailer resets, the co-packing, it takes a long time to get things going.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The retailer reset part is, and sometimes you submit and you just don't
Yep.
hear anything, and then you have to wait for another 8 months to resubmit.
Absolutely.
And,
Yep.
like I've told people, my recent launch is Bristol Farms and Mother's Market.
Yeah. Congratulations.
And I'm like, that has taken over a year for
Yeah.
each of
Absolutely.
those chains for me to actually get onto their shelf.
Yep.
So it does take a long time.
I hear you. Yeah.
And I hope the first run goes well, because there are things that can,
Absolutely.
learning obstacles that you
Of course.
discover during the actual production.
Yeah, of course. And with this being carbonated too, there's obviously a lot more that can go wrong, just kind of if you don't get the levels right. And so I am really excited. And I think for me, kind of having that experience doing this for so long, like I go into this knowing like all the problems that can happen. Like I already know, like, hey, I'm not going to get as many cases as I kind of signed up for, right? Because you're going to have spillage and you're just going to, I know that. So I think for me, that's been really just kind of reassuring. And my husband's like, you just don't seem stressed out. And I'm like, well, I basically, what I always say is I've made my mistakes on someone else's dimes, right? Like in the last like few brands.
Right.
And those are expensive mistakes. And so I've kind of taken that, and now I know exactly, what to do, what not to do. And kind of, I basically, shortcutted my startup. I guess that's the way I can, put it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you're so smart, and you're at such an advantage because of your experience. I mean, even like where I am today to where I was when we first started, I mean, I had no idea
Yeah.
the intensity and just all the different, like all the different ingredients, like, oh, one retailer doesn't take this type of ingredient, all these different certifications,
Yeah.
the non-GMO verification.
Yeah.
So it was a ton of learning. And on top of that, learning how to raise capital and learning how to create a pitch deck. And so it's, I think because my business started out in such an accidental way.
Yeah.
I never intended on having a food business. I never knew how, or it kind of the business came to me. And even in the beginning as a hobby, I tried to quit, but people forced me to keep on going. And
I'm so glad they did.
I do, I love it, but I agree. And I think there's something in that, where if there's someone that was like, hey, I really want to start a food CPG business, I would say maybe go work for one first.
Yeah, absolutely. I say that a lot. And, I think, I speak to a lot of kind of younger, I guess they're even Gen Zs, there, some of them are high school, but I say to them, don't fall in love with that whole narrative that you see on TikTok, right? And Instagram.
Right.
And it's just like founders that, they're not telling you the whole story.
Exactly.
And of course, they're only going to post about the good things, right? Like and it's just, there's just so much more that I think that people don't know, and don't hear from these kind of, I think, younger founders. It just looks so sexy. I understand that. Like I do.
I tell people it's not sexy. Like they're like, oh, are you too big for me to order from you? I'm like, no, the most money I make is when you buy it from my trunk.
Exactly. Totally. Yes. And it's like, it's lonely, right? Like you're alone all the time. It's just,
I don't care. Text me. I'll sell you some sauce from my trunk.
And that's how it is. And so I'm saying, like, I don't think a lot of people kind of know that story of it, because it just looks fun, right? And so and I say that there's a lot of kind of focus that's been put on these founders that are like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and they're living in their parents' house. But I'm like, okay, like now I'm at an age where I might not make my mortgage next month because I'm bootstrapping this first part of it, right? And that's how expensive it is. I made this joke that, well, it's not even a joke, but we tried to get out a HELOC, so a home equity line of credit.
Yeah.
But, as you know, I think you're, worked in real estate.
Yeah.
Like, this world is not set up for self-employed people, right? Like, it is
No.
so difficult. And we're like, we have so much equity in the home. And they're like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, you're not getting a regular W-2. Like, it's kind of crazy. And so like those are the things where I'm kind of like, all right, well, what I do have going for me is this 20 years of experience where I don't need to make all these expensive mistakes and I can just kind of go and get the work done. But yeah, I do think there needs to be a little bit more storytelling around doing it the boring traditional way, I guess, like I have.
It's true. No, I tell people, I'm like, it's so sad. Like I filed my tax return last year and it was zero. I was like,
Exactly.
they didn't even let me like contribute to my to my IRA because they're like, you didn't make any money, so you can't
Yeah.
your IRA. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I never expected in my 40s, right?
Yeah,
To
absolutely.
have that. I came from banking background, real estate background. So I'm just like, oh my God, this is so sad. But I think, I think we have to, and that's where the hard work and I think, the hard work and the faith really has to come in. You have to love what you're doing. And like for you, I mean, like ginseng is important to you. It's something that you grew up and from your culture and you want to bring it out for everyone to learn about the health benefits and to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Same thing. I mean, I'm really trying to change the Asian food aisle. I mean, we can have Asian flavors like Vietnamese flavors without all that sugar and all that preservatives because it's gonna take time. And I think going back to the sexiness we see online, it's like, wow, how do they sell their company for 200 million after 3 years? Or we feel like we're not doing it fast enough, but
no.
do it the right way. It takes time.
Really? And and that's another thing, you mentioned a really great point. So I talk to a lot of these, students and whatnot about these brands. And so you think about body armor that sold, and so many people had only heard of it in the last few years. And I'm like, it has been around for so long. I mean, I was back there in 2011. So that's like more than 10 years ago. And obviously it was around even before then. And then you think of a brand like Celsius, where it just really started, people think it just blew up. It's been around for 2 decades.
Oh, really? See, I didn't know.
Exactly. And I think that's the dangers of kind of, learning about these brands when they kind of get to this point of like, hey, like I've heard about it now. But yeah, like nobody talks about the brands that like how they built it up until that point. And so that's kind of when I say like, that's the part that's not sexy. That's the part that's the hard work. It's just us like staying up late at night. It's like we said before this podcast, we're losing our hair, right? Like that's the part that people don't see. And I think it is important for everyone to kind of see that part of this business.
Yes, and I do my best to share and be transparent
Absolutely.
because it's you do people and I've had moments of that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel so behind, or how am I ever going to make this work? But I went back and I posted on Instagram today a flashback. So this time last year, the peanut sauce was not even on the market, right? I was just doing pre-orders on Shopify. And just to kind of gauge, like what kind of feedback I would get. So I did some pre-ordering and I was posting about how people can pre-order. But I look back today, I mean, the sales for the peanut sauce is just a couple $1,000s away from the sales of as the satay sauce, which
that's amazing.
I started in my kitchen in 2015. So we have to always celebrate and not be so hard on ourselves sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'll ever get to XYZ, but it's like, well, you got to this amount where 2 years ago it seemed impossible.
Yeah.
So, like
absolutely.
The incremental successes, I think, is what really solidifies a real business that is building and growing, and not just not just PR driven, right? Not just like PR.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly.
I see people go out of business after, they're like, we just had a national launch. Everything's
Yep.
great. And then 6 months later, we're like, we're sorry, we couldn't raise money, so we have to close. And I'm like, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go into that trap,
No. And the way that you've done it, I mean, that's really just kind of, I think, again, there's no one right way, and I understand that, but I think foundationally, I'm a huge believer in going, so focused, so laser focused, one market at a time, kind of
Right.
get that model going, figure out, hey, how do I scale this model? And then when that market is running on its own pretty automatically, that's when you launch the next market. And so I'm a pretty big believer in that. And, for me, this is definitely a marathon. It's not a sprint. If someone said, hey, in 20 years, if you're still doing this, I'd be so happy, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, we have dreams of doing it for a lot less time.
Yeah.
Right.
Also being able to pay ourselves.
Yeah, but exactly. But I do think, that mindset of someone saying, hey, in 5 years, like I want to, be acquired, like that's where you get into trouble, because you're just making these awful rash decisions. That's, it's going to hurt the business.
So
And that's, kind of what you said about, celebrating every milestone. I think that's really the way I've kind of lived my life, not even just from work, but personally. But I always say, have really big dreams, but you can't stop there, right? Like you need to have attainable goals along the way. And so how are you going to get to that dream? Like people can say, I want to live in a huge house. And it's like, well, okay, well, how are you going to do that? Like you can dream about it, but then set your attainable goals. So in 2 years, I'm going to be working here, right? And the years after that, like I want to be making this much. And so I think even with business, like that's really how I've approached Ginsa. And I'm like, okay, by the end of this year, like I want to be done with my, production run, and I'm going to have, this going on. And so I think that's just really important as a founder to make sure that we have these like attainable goals that help us get to our dreams.
I love that. I think that is huge. And that is probably the biggest advice I've ever, heard from anyone I've interviewed on here, because it is a marathon, but having those, I think celebrating those goals, having those incremental goals and celebrating it is so big. So then it takes away the comparison.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly.
And it helps you be disciplined.
Yeah.
So I recently read the book Ramping Your Brand, and I'm like, I wish I read this when I was first starting, but at the same time, like maybe if I did, I may not have started.
Yeah, this is true.
Ignorance is bliss, at some times, but
Yeah.
but now, I mean, it's not where it's too late, because that was like the feeling I've already had too, coming from a finance background. I'm like, I'm just not understanding the amount of money I see being spent, where I've just been so scrappy, so careful. And even then it gets so expensive.
It does. And I think that's a really great mindset to have, even when, you start bringing in a ton of like revenue and, you're getting paid, right? You're finally paying yourself. But that scrappiness, I mean, I was like that with all my brands, regardless of like how big we got. And I think that's something that you just can't lose. And especially as your own, it's your brand and you're the founder. So you're always going to have that little element of like, hey, how can I do this a little bit better on the cheaper?
Yeah.
So I think to me, that always helps, regardless of how big you get. And I think it helps you just make wiser decisions.
It does.
Yeah, it really does.
Awesome. Well, Julia, I am so excited to try Ginsa. I'm so happy for you. And I know that you're going to be so successful. I mean, you've been such a wealth of knowledge and just helping me, like before we even, back in 2020, I was like, I didn't have inventory. I was like, I don't have a co-packer. I'm not sure why I should keep going, but there is something when you love and believe in, it won't let you give up.
Yes.
So I know that, all of your experience has been preparing you for this moment when you have your own brand. So I'm super excited for you.
Thank you, Wynn. And again, I just want to say congratulations to you, because like I said, I have been following you and I've seen just all the retailers that you've been getting into. And it is, I had no doubt, obviously I've been wanting to work with you for a while, And I love your sauce. I haven't tried the peanut yet though. But the chili one, I bought it from Amazon. So if you guys haven't tried it, please buy it. It's amazing. It follows so much. But yeah, I applaud you. I think you've just done tremendously well. And like I said, I've been following your story, so I'm excited to see what's to come.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And, there's still good days and bad days.
Yep, it
So
will be like
I always
that.
talk about finding your network,
Yeah.
finding people around you that help support you. And I'm
Yeah.
here for you too. I know you're much more experienced than I am, but anytime you feel down or
Of
have,
course.
have something that you're struggling with, feel free.
Yeah. I will take you up on that.
Thank you, Juliet.
Thanks,
Well,
Wynn.
everyone, thank you so much for listening in today. And if you like and have learned something from our podcast, please share it and don't forget to subscribe.